Hey, Brenda, how are you doing?
Hey, Mark, how are you? It looks
I'm,
like you're not in the office.
I'm not. So, this is not a Zoom background. You can see the ocean behind me. I'm enjoying warm tropical weather. First vacation here for us in a year plus. So, kind of nice to get away, some warm weather. I understand uh, you're getting some snow coming up there in Western PA.
Yeah, that is exactly right. My background is also not a Zoom background, but it isn't too bad out now. There's a little bit of sun, but the nor'easterner, our first nor'easterner of the season, is on its way. Although I think in Western Pennsylvania, we're not going to get a ton of snow, but we are certainly in the path of getting some snow. But hey, it's December. It's coming tomorrow, December 16th. And I think if you live in Western Pennsylvania at this time of year, you should expect snow. And your background is beautiful. I'm jealous. I'm glad to see that you did get a vacation in this year. I know that traveling is one of you love to travel. And I know you had a couple great trips planned this year and weren't able to get them in. So I'm thrilled to see you are in Mexico. However, as someone who lives in South Florida, I think you
Yeah.
have it pretty good.
The weather is actually quite similar, right? And I do like hot, humid weather. So for me, it's a real benefit here. I do know we talked ahead of time. My Wi-Fi comes in and out, so for those of you watching, if I get cut out, then I apologize for that. But yeah, a lot of interesting things happening here as we get near the end of the year. I know we've talked about, obviously the virus. I will say before, I did want to mention, which I think is great. They're getting ready for emergency approval for the next level of vaccine. My understanding is combined between the two vaccines, they'll have enough dosage by the end of Q1 to have inoculated or vaccinated, I guess, 150 million Americans. I know there's still at least 180,000 or 180 million of us not vaccinated, but certainly a great start. Coming here, we were a little nervous, to travel. My mom called me. She's like begging me. I don't know if I told you, this was pretty funny, begging me not to come. And I said, we're going to go, we wear masks, we wear the face shield, we only eat outside. Talked to my cousin a few days later. My cousin said, oh, I hear you're reconsidering going on your vacation. I'm like, who are you talking to, Mom? And she's like, no, I was talking to my mom. I'm like, oh, here we go. Word's getting around.
It is exciting about the vaccine. I watched the trucks take off, and without giving away my age, there are things in my life that you remember, like we just saw earlier this year and I can't remember. Is it SpaceX, the rockets that went, up to the space station, and you watch those things with like, you hold your breath and you're so excited. Yeah. And I'm not gonna, like, this is the first time in my life that watching these trucks leave with the vaccine in them, it's emotional, right? I mean, like, it's so exciting. In Western Pennsylvania, I believe it's UPMC or Children's Hospital received them yesterday. And, clearly, it's just really exciting, when you have like deployed soldiers coming back. I mean, it gives you that kind of like feeling. Yeah. And politics aside, when you think about where we were and the fact that we did get this vaccine, we, like I had any help in getting it built or developed. It is, when people work together and work for a common good, I think it shows what we can do, right? I mean, that's what it's about, I think.
I think it's, when you look at this, right, this is really a Western, these vaccines between, Europe, the United States, Japan, all working together, South Korea to get these vaccines done, et cetera. And to your point, it's really been a marvel how fast they get these, up to speed, tested, My understanding is there's some side effects. It's not the most pleasant experience, but certainly not dangerous. And I know that there's some people saying they won't get the vaccine. I actually messaged my doctor and said, listen, because I'm way back in the line. I'm 60, clearly. I'm healthy, no pre-existing conditions, which is all great. But I'm like, when you do that calculator, I'm like 280 million. And so I said, listen, if you have extra vaccine and you can't find people who want it, call me up and I will be there ASAP to get it.
That's right. That's right. I'm also not in the front of the line, and but I have zero hesitation of getting the vaccine. And as soon as my name or number or is called or there's one available, I'm getting it. I have no hesitation, and it is exciting. I do want to ask you, given where we are, given the numbers and the belief of who are the numbers available by June of next year. What do you think that means for us from, media industries or technology company, but in general for the economy, for the U.S.? I mean, do you see us getting back to normal or back into the office? I know you have stated for Matrix, it's looking like an April review of what we're going to do. Do you see that accelerating? Do you see that timeline staying as is? Or, how do you think this will impact the first half of the year?
Yeah, I'm hopeful that, listen, when I look at it honestly, I think probably not until June, but by the time June comes, most of us should be inoculated. We should be at 70+% mark. I think from an economy standpoint, it clearly will help. I think for media, it will be great. I think everyone has a hunger to get back on the road. And we're here, and this is very nice. I'm thankful. Of course, I mean, I'm privileged to be able to do this. Many people can't, are too scared to get away, which I fully understand. But think about, you're already seeing some pickup in travel advertisements, but I think there's going to be this pent-up demand. You think about what we've been buying. We've been buying sweatpants. We've been buying things for the home, etc. There's a whole parts of the economy that have not been really participating in that. My biggest fear is how does the restaurant and those kind of small businesses get back? Because you go everywhere and there's plenty of closures for good. And I think it's going to take some real time to get the back on their feet and moving. And I just, it depends. I'm like, this is to me time to start thinking about opening a restaurant, because I think there's going to be a limited number of them, and they are going to, the ones that survive will probably do pretty well. We're all, at least I am, I'm not an introvert to being home. I don't know about you.
I think I agree. I do think, it certainly gets us on the path of the right path. And I know from, a media perspective that events, Olympics, big revenue generating from ads should be back in play. And that's very exciting. And so I am hoping to get back to a new normal. I will say we have got less than 30 seconds. We've got a great candid conversation going on today. We've got Jack Myers joining me. And so we're looking forward to that. And I've enjoyed having you with me, Mark, for the pregame.
But before we go, we do have a big announcement coming tomorrow. Maybe you want to share with our viewers?
I do. We are announcing tomorrow it's not just forming, it's out there. We've been active. The Media Ad Sales Council that we, Mark and I and the Matrix team decided to put together with some of our clients, some of our partner vendors in the industry, all focused on the commitment to making the ad sales process frictionless, if you will, via the media enterprises and via the technology partners or the institutions that are part of the ad sales workflow. So I'm very excited. We've got a great announcement coming out tomorrow. We've got great action items for 2021. Stay tuned. Follow up if you've got any questions. And if you'd like to join us, reach out to Mark and or I and let us know your interest, and we'll get you included in working with the Media Ad Sales Council. Very excited.
So for me, from Mexico, que tengas un buen día. Brenda, have a great day. Everybody on board, enjoy your candid conversation with Jack Myers, with your host, Brenda Hetrick.
Thanks, Mark. Take care. Enjoy. Hi, Jack. Welcome to the Candid Conversation. Good afternoon. I can see from your background, maybe you are. I don't think you are. You're not in Mexico, are you?
No, but I'm envious of Mark. That's not a bad view behind him.
That's exactly right. I was thinking initially, it's okay. We didn't really get any vacations in. We've got some thoughts in the first part of the year. But when I see that, I was like, oh, I'm pretty jealous that Mark's in Mexico. It looks beautiful.
I'm just not sure I'm ready to do airports and airplanes again. Planes, trains, and automobiles,
Yeah.
I'll stick with the automobiles.
Yeah, I hear you. I've been pretty careful and I did get, COVID, but anyway, not to go down that path, but I'm still a little hesitant to be out and about. I've tried to follow the rules and kept within, my home, my little local community and my family here. It hasn't been easy. And I will say, given we've got 16 days left of this month or this year, hard to believe it's coming to an end. And I do think we're turning the corner and it's looking up for the Q1 of next year. But I do miss people. I miss restaurants. I miss live music. I miss going to the theater. I just miss a lot. But we made it through, right?
So far we've made it through. And I have to admit, this has, in many ways, there have been as many negatives and tragedies as there have been in 2020 and will continue to be in 2021. There are a lot of positives that have come out of both the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the Black Lives Matter movement. And I think there's a heightened awareness among people of the realities and the dangers that exist in the world and the need, especially in the media industry, to confront those dangers.
Right. And we're gonna talk a little bit about that, Jack, but I do want to set the stage for our listeners and our participants. And, I know you, Jack Myers, you're founder of Media Village, but why don't you just quick overview of your background in the media industry? I know it hasn't always been in Media Village. Let us know where you started and how you got to where you are today. And if you could also tie in what prompted you then to create Media Village.
Yeah. The common thread, the advantage of having been in an industry for so long, is the ability to look back and find common patterns. And the common pattern has been that I've somehow managed to have put myself into at each point where technology's made a significant leap forward. I've been able to have a role in seeing that, viewing that, and having a participation in it. Dating back to one of my early jobs was at ABC FM radio, WPLJ in New York, just as the industry was moving from AM and FM was becoming a force. And I was able to follow that. WPLJ, when I got there, was the number 15 FM station and probably number 30 station in the market. And when I left just 3.5 years later, I was in sales management. It was the number 3 station in the market. And watching how that transformed the whole industry and a perception and the content, everything shifted. And I went from there to CBS, Channel 2 in New York, WCBS TV, and then were the 5 owned and operated CBS TV stations, whereas head of new business development, something that TV networks and stations didn't really believe in because everything was coming in. It was veils. We waited. But I got very involved in the impact and role of technology and the implications of technology very early in the late 1970s, early 80s, just as cable was coming on. I became a big fan of cable. CBS told me if I liked cable so effing much, maybe I should go to work for effing cable, which I did. And I went to a network called UTV for 2 years. It didn't get off the ground, but I had a chance to meet and spend time with people like John Malone at then TCI, and Bill Daniels and J.C. Sparkman, and the folks out at Cablevision around the industry, and really understood and learned from the bottom up the realities of cable. And then when UTV didn't get off the ground, I decided that I really liked the idea of tracking technology on culture. My educational degree from my master's is in something called media ecology, which is the impact of media on culture, culture on media, society. And I decided to really build a research and consulting company around the impact of technology and media on culture, society, and vice versa. Did that up until 2009. Consulting was 70% of my revenues, research the other 30%, and content was a value add. And I realized that thought leadership, there was really no home for thought leadership. And I did an assessment of all the media companies for their websites, their B2B websites, and found that typically down at the bottom of their promotion site, their consumer promotion site, you saw a little line that said, advertise with us, and you clicked on it and it went to an email form. So I decided there was an opportunity to build a home for B2B content and evolve that thing. It was Field of Dreams. If we build this great site, they're going to come. And then we realized, well, they didn't have the content to come. So then we began hiring journalists and columnists, launched what was then called Media Biz Bloggers. And now we're the home for over 150 dedicated individual content platforms for media companies, agencies, brand marketers, the ANA, 4As, Ad Council. Subject matter experts have dedicated thought leadership and content marketing platforms at Media Village. That was the evolution of it.
Hal, I have 2 questions, and one is to go back to the beginning. So you started in radio, and then you went to broadcast or to television. Do you think that radio experience helped you with selling advertising in the broadcast space, or I know a couple people have done that same evolution, started in radio and then moved into the broadcast. I know there are some similarities, but how at the time, I know you said you were a lot of order takers waiting for the avails to come in. Did you find radio required way more biz dev than TV at the time, or did you sense
my job? That's a great question. I never liked the being an AE, calling on agencies and doing avails. I always liked the idea of finding those companies that were not using any radio, that were not using any television, and figuring out why not, and what we could do, what we could create, whether it was at ABC or at CBS, what we could create that would make our medium a more important, palatable resource for them. And the common denominator that I found was going to the retail community and learning and understanding how they were viewing our medium. And it's interesting because today so much is looking at commerce, and I'm sure we'll talk about the impact of Amazon and all the commerce-based sites now in the funnel, and really understanding that they typically looked at radio and television as a brand sell, not a commerce-based sell, not a driver of business. And it was really understanding that that's how it had been sold to them. And we were targeting 2% of their budget. How could we go after the 98% of their budget? And typically that meant that money that they were spending was coming from their suppliers, from the packaged goods companies, the clothing, the manufacturers, vendor support or co-op dollars. And so I really became an expert early on in understanding co-op, vendor support, partnering with the retailers to help them get the money and then to do sales-based messages on radio and television as opposed to brand-based. And that became incredibly successful. We built at CBS a program called FIRST, Framework for Ensuring Retailers' Success with Television. If there are any old timers in the audience, they may remember the FIRST program. And that then evolved into pitching and being successful in bringing in the designer jeans category we broke and many other new business categories. We were the first ones to go after the video game business early in the 80s when that was first launching Atari and ColecoVision and some of the other brands. So it's an interesting question because learning how to sell radio and television, you never really had to learn how to sell it. You needed to learn how to build relationships and how to make sure you got your fair share of any budget that became available. In a new business model, you had to go and you had to develop a customized program targeted to their particular interest needs and vendor supply chain. Supply chain are two words we're beginning to hear more and more because it has a huge impact on our media advertising business today. It was unknown back then, but once you understood the supply chain and where the budgets actually evolved from, you could then implement that. And that's been incredibly instructive throughout my career as a consultant to media companies, helping them understand how they could take new technology as it evolved and tap into new revenue sources using that technology. And of course, in digital, that's key.
Right. Lots of good points there. And I do want to come back and unpack some of those. But before we get into more of the granular questions, I do want to come back to just you in general. And I know a couple of weeks ago you had a stinging point of view on the soul of media and FANG and or tech conglomerates, if you will, and the destruction of it. I'm curious what the feedback has been, and are you still 100? And you know, I agree. So I agreed with your original point of view, but I'm asking, are you still aligned with your original point of view?
Yeah, it was called Battle for the Soul of Media, and of course it tied into Battle for the Soul of America. It's at jackmyersthinktank.com, where I also have a podcast on data versus ideas and respect and disrespect. It's thematic. The Battle for the Soul of Media really focuses in not so much on FANG as it does on how effectively companies like Facebook have positioned themselves as media companies and are competing for media budgets when in fact they're really not a part of the media industry. They're a part of a very different industry that's heavily commerce-based. The vast majority of their revenues are small, very small and small businesses. It's a self-serve. Two words that I use repeatedly now are turnkey and seamless. And they've created a very turnkey and seamless model for integration. And then they've imported that into the agencies and in-house agencies at national marketers to enable them to do business in a seamless and turnkey way and shift money away from the more traditional media resources, television, radio, out of everything. And they suck it in. And that's really, yet they embed themselves in our media industry and they become very active in all of our nonprofit groups, all of our trade associations, and they begin to dictate the direction that those organizations go in, the research studies that they do, the projects they take on. And invariably, they're advocating for tools and resources while at the same time, they're moving to suck those same revenues that they're ostensibly helping the industry bring in. So I consider that somewhat of a cancer eating at the soul of the media industry. And I think the simple way to position it is they're very focused on the bottom of the funnel, but yet presenting themselves as being a top of the funnel competitor and sucking money at all ends of the spectrum. It's only a 3-minute podcast, so it's real easy to listen to, and I urge everyone to just go listen and give me your opinion. But no, the feedback, I've only heard positive feedback. I'm waiting for the negative feedback. I haven't gotten it yet.
I think you
Maybe
made
I'll get some as a result of this, but
yes. Stay tuned. We can see what we can do for that. Now, I think our core constituency or our core partners or clients are all media based, and we sit in the sales organization. And I do think from a traditional media perspective, they certainly see FANG as competitors. But I think you're spot on when you said they are a competitor. They're a competitor at the lower end or the bottom end of the funnel. It's not relationship driven. It's not about the value of the inventory. But I do think it's incredibly difficult for traditional media sellers to understand and bridge that gap, how to position their inventory versus the digital inventory of Facebook or Amazon. What would you say to a media sales team today, out there wanting to win dollars from these guys? How would you tell them to position themselves? What would you encourage them to say or do?
It's a big question, and I'll preface my answer by saying those in the audience who have been around the local broadcast business for any length of time know the concept of operating in the public interest. Public interest, convenience, and necessity was at the foundation, and there was not only an obligation, it was regulated. Those regulations have been gone for a while, but what's eroded is the trust in media, the consumer trust in media. It's at its lowest point ever, and where our industry was always built on quality content, service and support of the public interest, trusted and truthful journalism, and marketers should pay a premium for that. And instead, and here's where I think I get to the answer to your question, instead we've been pushed by digital media and the idea that it should be impressions based into a model that devalues quality content, it devalues trust, it devalues truthfulness, it devalues quality, and it values how many impressions you can offer and at what price. That's a commoditized transactional business. Now, if that's your business, if you're a Walmart, a media, and you can aggregate a lot of audiences and deliver them across multiple platforms the way an NBCU is doing very effectively, you can then compete. You can compete, and you can be both price sensitive as well as generate premium content for premium dollars for your best content. When you're locked into a strictly commoditized and transactional sell, you have no place to go but down. And that means if you're not constantly increasing your impressions, and then that takes you away necessarily from quality, from serving the public interest, from truthful journalism.
So I do hear you, and I agree with you on premium content, and there should be a value to that premium content. We do hear all the time that it is easier to buy the digital. It is easier to, there's less friction in that buying and selling, supply and demand in that ecosystem as it is in traditional or premium content. So how do you lessen that friction? And I'll ask both questions. How do you lessen the friction? And then how do you commoditize it equally? Because you said about impressions, and I'm not sure that you were saying we don't need impressions, but how do we ensure that if we go to an impression-based measurement system for both digital and premium content, and some digital content is premium, so I don't want to throw it all out there, but how do we get to an equal measurement? Is it people talking and we agree, or do you see technology needing to play the pivotal role?
Well, technology has to play a role, of course. Nielsen announced earlier this week their Nielsen 1 for 2004, which is a standardized platform, intended to be a standardized platform across multiple media. You've got a lot of walled gardens popping up, Facebook, Google, YouTube, walled garden, Amazon, walled garden. Now you've got Walgreens, CVS, Target, Roundel Media reinvented by Target, Walmart Media, more and more major retailer chains starting their own media sales organizations, again, competing for the same ad dollars everyone else is dealing with, is looking for. And they'll increasingly be able to segment into local markets and compete with local broadcasters. So that's the greatest threat on the horizon. And there is no trust. There's lack of confidence in any kind of standardized message. You've got Project Door, which has been developed. I think it's Vizio, Dish, NBCU, Disney, Warner Brothers, Warner Media, CBS, Hearst, AMC, and Discovery, I believe, are the partners. I believe Ampersand on the local cable side is pulling together its own kind of aggregated marketplace. I think the local broadcast, radio and television, not necessarily segregated from each other. I think if you look at radio, television, the question is, can the industry ever come together to create its own walled garden or dedicated, technology-based resource that will make all the inventory available in an automated context? I don't know that that's practical. We have the Cox and Katz reps still operating in a fairly old-fashioned model, for lack of a better word. And I'm not sure what the initiatives are. There may be initiatives out there that I'm not familiar with, and I'm sure there are. You may have some, Brenda, some solutions. But I think the local media industry, look at what NBC has done, pulling their local TV inventory under their NBCU1 initiative, where all the content is being put together under a single umbrella to simplify it, make it turnkey and seamless. Until it's turnkey and seamless, I think that there has to be a real presentation of the differential that's quality-based, trusted-based, impressions-based, and engagement-based. Impressions, yes, but to demonstrate there's more value in other ways to the inventory that goes beyond a low CPM.
So I hear you on NBCU and the one campaign, which I think to your point is quite impressive. And we have local broadcasters that have a pretty powerful footprint. A few of those, more than a few. We've got the local network part of that. Do you see a morphing of do you see a Nexstar or a Sinclair, which I think we probably would say yes to this, but do you see them becoming like more of a network with that type of structure so that they can get their inventory, unified across, or their portfolio of products unified across one buy?
Competitively, I would expect you'd see that within the next 24 to 36 months, inevitably. Sinclair, perfect example, where they have, of course, a tremendous depth and breadth of local inventory, but increasingly investing in a national presence. And of course, Nexstar, EW Scripps with ION, which is a perfect example of aggregating stations into a network sale. The question is, do each of those are they competitors to each other, or are they aggregated them ultimately to compete more effectively with the Facebooks and YouTubes and even the NBCUs?
Yeah, I think that's the big question, correct? I mean, we've talked about this many times with our customers. As we announced at the beginning of or at the end of the pregame, we've created a media ad sales council, or founded matrix with some of our key customers or partners represented, as well as vendors and partners in the ecosystem of buying and selling, your advertising inventory, which is where we sit. We're clearly about the sales organization. And I think conceptually, everyone understands that the aggregation of inventory to get the same reach might be necessary. I'm not sure everyone is thinking of it holistically among or between media companies versus I'll aggregate my own and grow my own pie so that I can solve the problem with my own pie, which, listen, as, free market capitalists, you need to do where you think it's going to be best suited for your business. I understand that. I want to come back to this one more question on this before we get into more technology perspective. And that is, traditional media sellers. We've talked a little bit about this, and I want to talk more from the salesperson. You might have a linear seller, and I know even on the agency side, the digital money comes from this pocket, the linear money or TV money comes from this group. How do you see, or what do you encourage from a sales skill perspective? If you were telling a new media seller entering, starting their job on January 2nd of 2021, what is the best skill they could have to, monetize their inventory? What would it be?
Depends on what's being sold. If what's being sold is an impressions-based media model, then computer capabilities, the ability to really understand the technology, that's going to be key. If you're selling a brand, if your goal is to, sell the quality of your content, the value of the impression, the fact that viewers are more likely to consume from advertisers who are there, and that's much harder to prove, then it goes back to your ability to drive deeply to the source. And number one ability is to educate. You want to be able to educate someone. Now, that's not necessarily considered a skill, but I've found that some of the best sellers are educators because they have to not just share a message, but help people understand what that message is. It's a really tough question you're asking, Brenda, because we're at such a point. We can talk about change, we can talk about transition, about transformation. We're at the point of metamorphosis. That's the equivalent. When I spoke at your event a year ago, I said we're in the final stages of a transition, a metamorphosis that's comparable from moving from the agrarian age to the industrial age. And in the first 20 years, you had the development of the technology, the implementation, the scaling of the technology, and everything in terms of the business moved in the last 10 years of that 30-year transformation or metamorphosis. We're in the final stages of that 30-year period in our industry. If you look at the internet starting in 1993 with Mosaic browser, 93, 03, 13, 23. We're in the last phase of a huge metamorphosis. In 2024, we'll be looking back at a very different industry. So I think the biggest quality is to be able to embrace change, move with it, see where things are going, have some type of vision, and to be able to communicate to whoever your client is, and whether it's through data in the machines and machine learning, and to be able to use that effectively, or it's on a one-to-one basis, getting to that true decision maker and getting them to do something differently than they've been doing. It's really a matter of understanding where the future is and where it's headed, and embracing it and getting there before the rest of the market does.
So, and I, adding to that, or asking, follow-up question to that, and I know you've talked a little bit about technology clearly has to play a role in the future. Do you see the critical component, the data, and or is it a solution that reduces the friction between buying and selling, or supply and demand, getting the buy, wherever that buy comes from, to the appropriate plan, solution, inventory in a more efficient way? Or is it, or do you see data overtaking that component?
Well, I definitely see data overtaking that, unfortunately, but I look at two different things: information versus knowledge. To me, information is a form of garbage, barely useful for performing the most fundamental tasks. Information, we're inundated with information. But what knowledge, what are we learning that we can actually use and implement? And unfortunately, our data sources are increasingly focused on delivering information rather than knowledge. And the recipients at the brands, at the marketers, are using knowledge. They're looking at their own data. The agencies, the holding companies are all developing their own data and knowledge sources. The challenge that a media seller has is you've got to adapt. Every agency has a different set of data that they're looking at. Every client has a different set of data they're looking at. You can't do it all. And until we get to some kind of standardized model within our industry that the buyers and the clients need to adapt their content, their data to, we're in a position where we have to adapt our data to their needs, and it's an impossible task. So I really have a distrust right now in where we are with data, and a lot of hope for where we're headed with things like Nielsen One and some of the other aggregated models that allow the media industry to come together behind one data set. Until we get there, we're in a free-for-all. And I think the best way to manage in a free-for-all is to try, unfortunately, is try to push down the other guy and get to the top of the mountain. And that's a self-destructive model that our industry has been following forever. That, radio competes with radio, TV with TV. Coming out of Channel 2 in New York, I went in to the retailers who didn't use any television, and I said, even though it wasn't true at the time, I said, I'm here on behalf of the whole television industry. You work with me, you're working with the whole industry. and then I actually for a wall-bound supermarket, which doesn't exist, I don't think anymore. Maybe it does. I actually was the media buyer. I was working at CBS as sales manager, and I actually made the buy on their behalf on ABC and NBC. So go figure.
Yep. I know, and we're coming up to time here, so I do want to encourage anyone if they've done. Yeah, I know. And I still have a couple questions. I didn't get them all in, but it was good conversation. If anyone has any questions, to go ahead and put them in the chat Q&A function, and I will bring those up. I wanted to ask you, and sort of, this is our final question, but it's got a couple components, and that is, looking out and from your position of your knowledge of the industry, your experience in the industry, what you're seeing, reading at Media Village, what is your prediction for the industry in the next, 12, 24 months? From a sales perspective, but also from the industry in general. And, we have, I believe the election has been finalized, and we will have a change in leadership. What do you think that will do to the industry, or how do you think that will impact the industry? And then just from your own perceptions of, 2 to 3 things that you believe are going to be key in the next 12 to 24 months.
Well, I think, that commercial mayhem, I think next 24, 36 months are going to be mayhem. The streamers, there's got to be an unbundling, and at the same time, a rebundling, an aggregation, and new winners are going to sort out, new partnerships. There's going to be more consolidation. There's going to be more regulation. We're going to have a different tax code implications. The globalization of a lot of these platforms are going to have an impact on, we're seeing, advertisers like Coca-Cola going for more globalization in their media buying and creative to try to take advantage of some of these platforms. We don't know whether Netflix will go to a sponsorship model, limited sponsorship model at some point. But certainly mayhem is going to be the rule of the day. I want to get in a plug for meetingprep.com, which is the new vertical search engine launched by Media Village. Meetingprep.com is B2B search for media marketing, advertising. Interested in advanced television, go to meetingprep.com, search advanced television. Interested in local radio, interested in audio. There's a wealth of thought leadership from people like Bill Harvey in terms of ROI and many other industry thought leaders and subject matter experts, Jim Matabali on auto marketing, talking about what's happening in the auto business with interviews with the CMOs of all the auto companies. So, I think knowledge, education, and workforce diversity are going to be the three key focus. If you think about stakeholder education, how do we reach and communicate effectively with the brand leaders, keeping in mind that the agencies have trouble getting at the brands to the people who own the budgets at the brand and at the procurement level. The CMOs have difficulty getting to the people within their own companies who control the media budgets and the procurement budgets. So we need education to reach them. And then we also need to diversify our workforce to compare to the workforce of the agencies and clients, and then educate that workforce. So education, diversity are the two tentpoles that I've been focusing on and that I believe are going to be the keys to success and failure in the next decade. How effectively are you educating your stakeholders, defining your stakeholders accurately? How successfully are you evaluating how you're perceived in the marketplace and how to address positive and negative perceptions of your organization and your value proposition? And then how do you develop and educate a quality, diversified workforce? And that diversity is not just at the lower levels, it's also at the senior levels where we need a complete turnover of management, frankly, within our industry over the next decade.
I couldn't agree more. I do think, and we do have a question from the audience, so I do want to get to that before we wrap up here. I couldn't agree more, and I do think a year like we've just had, and Scott Galloway had said it, I follow him, and he said, like, in chaos, people who can make the biggest impact, do the greatest things. This is when leaders are found and developed. And I think, to your earlier point of, it wasn't, it's not just a pandemic, but we have Black Lives Matters. We have, many things going on in this country that, if not now, when, right, should we start to address these issues? And those who do it in the most efficient, effective manner, I believe, will be the winners, 2 to 3 years from now. And you'll see that the people who are able to I don't want to say take advantage, but who are able to react to this current situation, this current climate, and make positive changes, I agree with you, will be winners. The question is, what would your immediate response be to a business prospect saying nobody watches broadcast TV anymore?
Well, first of all, I'd point to Lowcast, and which is an antenna-based technology that is growing fast in about 25 markets for people. I'd say that I'd point to the percentage of people, even though it's declining, who are broadcast only. More importantly, I'd talk to the fact that a large percentage of broadcast programming, both network and local, is increasing and not declining. All the statistics show that the percentage, that there's growth with the digital redistribution of content, and it takes and the ability now to deliver in content across a spectrum of media types, that to narrow the focus to broadcast and say nobody watches broadcast, you may be, first of all, you're inaccurately talking about a distribution methodology whereas the content in which the advertising lives is growing in audiences. So you're not, if you're only buying a distribution technology that's data centric, and you can make arguments either way, but the fact is that where the advertising lives still works. Otherwise, you wouldn't see Amazon advertising more heavily in television, broadcasting, and television. You wouldn't see all the retailers who have their own media operations advertising more, Target, Walmart. So it's an illogical statement, and I think it needs to be confronted head on.
Right. Got it. Okay. Well, that is our time for today. My one last question is, we didn't prep for this one, and that is, if you were able to go on any vacation or travel to anywhere in the world, what would be your first choice?
Right now, today, I was supposed to be in Africa.
Ah.
I'm supposed to have a 3-week trip to Africa. I always, on my bucket list, there's always been Antarctic, but certainly Africa's at the top of the list.
Wonderful, wonderful.
What about you, Brenda? Where would you want to go? Mexico with Mark?
No, believe it or not, and this is, I'm not ashamed because I've never been and I so want to go, but I debate this, is to Montreal and Quebec. I've never been, and matter of fact, we're thinking about doing that in February of this year. But then I do think to myself, do I really want to be cold, So I'm not sure, but that is what's been in my mind lately. I would like, and we were supposed to do that this year with my kids. I have probably, maybe I'm sure we will be able to travel, but we would like to have scheduled, a couple weeks in Europe with us as a family. We've been different people, but not as a family, and that is also on our list. One last trip. I shouldn't say one last trip because who knows? But a trip with my family, my kids, through Europe. The problem with that is I have a son and a daughter, and we have competing interests. We probably would need 3 to 4 months to get everyone's, bucket list taken care of. And I have a son who's a history major and is interested in those things, and a daughter who is interested in fashion and art, etc. So we'd have to weave in a trip that could encompass both of them. Anyway, all right, Jack, thank you so very much for your time today. Really appreciate it. Great.
I just want to say MediaVillage.com, advancingdiversity.org, at Jack Myers Biz, and at MediaVillage.com.
Absolutely. And we will record this and push this out.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. Thank you, Jack. Take care. Bye-bye.